video, I will show the influences that led me to tell my story of growing up on a Bristol council estate in the 1960s and 70s. Well, one thing is sure, I certainly did not wake up one morning and decide, okay, time to tell my lived experience. It was a gradual happening, which hopefully this video will explain. My artist's oeuvre is rather a broad church, from expressing emotions through a paint stroke to creating what I called my abstract monumentals, tiny sculptures, leading to the creation of my museum, the Mock, which was all about inventing narratives for the tiny sculptures. However, at the same time, I love taking photos. It's quite inexpensive if you shop for refurbished equipment or just use the phone camera. It was almost like my hobby. Photos of urban areas, how people lived, what their lives are like, without actually picturing the people much. I often used myself as various characters in my works. My museum, for example, had Rachel, the chief archiver and Latinizationer. Money is also a huge barrier to working class creatives, which also accounted for my monumental sculptures, rather than the very costly monumental. In 2017, prior to my MA, and 2019, after, I spent some time in Tokyo doing a comparison of urban living with my own life, like a self-funded residency, because there was no way I could afford the amount it costs to go on an organised arts residency. I was travelling on the cheap, in shared houses and with minimum baggage, so the camera was it. Afterwards, I enjoyed the manipulation of those photos, with Photoshop using vibrant colour as an expression of my emotions at that time. I loved it. Part of my photography was taking night walks. I could not miss the opportunity as a lone female to wander a big city late at night on my own. In 2017, I was also scouted by a Fuji TV crew whilst I was walking around Shinjuku. So I had my very own TV camera crew doing a night walk with me. When I came back from Tokyo after the 2019 visit, the plan was to return to Tokyo after the 2020 Olympics to show images of the before and after. In 2019, Tokyo was a hive of everything was being spruced up, the bridges repainted, covered scaffolding everywhere, and areas being developed to build the Olympic villages. My chosen form of travel was a bike. It was cheap, and I cycled all over Tokyo like it was my personal playground. So bike-friendly and safe. Oh, and thank you to the workers who sent me in circles on my bike in areas no longer accessible because of building for the Olympics. Domo, domo, and a hand directed me that Harumi was closed for building. Of course, we all know what happened next. COVID. So none of my plans came to pass. During the COVID lockdown 2021, I began working for the Avon Local History and Archaeology Group. Avon being the older new county no longer in existence, but it defines the area covered. Bristol, of course, is back to being the city and county of Bristol, as it should be. In the 70s, I had to listen to my mother complaining for ages that the government had taken away Bristol's ancient charter that made it a county to create the awful new county of Avon. Anyway, I was not working with them as a historian, but as a graphic designer. I created their logo, planned the layout of web pages, created the graphic elements, etc., etc. Everything one expects a graphic designer to do. You can stop the vid here to read more about them. Anywho, personally, I was fascinated by their section of small booklets for sale, each telling a short narrative of approximately 10,000 words on a very precise subject relating to the Bristol Avon area. This led me to the National Archives page, where I read about the Pitbrow women, who worked on the coal pit surface, sorting coal, as told by the women who worked and documented their own story. I did not know women worked in the mines, to be quite honest. So this was fascinating. Not that I shall speak for you, but from the women's first-hand experiences in their own words, their voices. So here was the birth of my project, my story as told by me, a working-class creative. As I had often used characters in my works, I created a timeline of characters based on my own life story. They overlap, of course. Both Els and Tina were based on the Isle of Wight, as my parents had moved our family there from Bristol in 1977-78. Being a city girl, I had thought, why, parents, why? I left behind the exciting city life of Bristol with an ice rink to live in a field. Actually, it was still a council house. My parents had done a council house exchange. Elle's story was to be all about the sixth form graphic design years, my own roots, and Tina was about college and working for the first time. So then came the introduction of discos and nightlife, quite different from the school years, hence the division in characters. We shall overlook the reality that I went to discos in Bristol as a 15-year-old. Times were so very different. However, my project, unlike the local history group's booklets, was not precise. It seemed to be all over the place. I had completed a fair amount of work on the island by revisiting old stomping grounds and getting lost. I shall just pop the train video in here as an example. I can't believe I did that. There you go. The little station at Lake. It's a single track now. I'm sure it was two. And I'd have to remember where in the heck I'm going. Heath Road and the shops. I had pre-arranged a meeting with Key Arts in Newport on the island about exhibiting with them, as my story was island-based. The 80s and 90s, of course, were times of massive change. The Margaret Thatcher years, the right to buy of council housing, the Falklands War, the miners' strike. Then, coming towards the 90s, the poll tax riots. It's not a decade that can be covered quickly. Also, at that time, as a teenager, I thought the Falklands were off the top of Scotland. Oh, silly wabbit. Then it was a jump back to the now, and the depressive fact we still have social apartheid in Southampton, with the gated motorway bridge that divides the council homes from the private homes, making a walk to the riverside an unpleasant trek for the council estate residents alongside dual carriageway, rather than just a quick walk over a motorway bridge. It was built at the same time as the council estate for that very reason of giving residents easy access to the riverside. This surprisingly was a Labour council and a Labour MP's political choice. Many warehouses have recently been built on the riverside, and yet still that bridge, which is structurally sound, remains permanently gated. Look up the Cutteslowe Walls in Oxford, 1934 to 1959, for an example of British social apartheid. I cycled the area taking footage of the gated community, but with council-maintained roads. It should be opened so that those living on the council estate that need to get to the warehouses can do so easily without having to spend a prolonged amount of time in this traffic. Right, so this is the other end of Coniston, and that's where the path would be, the other side of this metal fencing. That would give, I don't know how clearly you can see that. You could just about see the path over there before the fencing for the warehouse, and that would give people access from the council estate to the jobs. Now somewhere around here is where the footpath would have come out. As far as I know, that's still public road. Right, found it. This is where the footpath would have come out, right next to the workplace. It's all quite sad, really. I did bring this to the attention of the local Labour councillors, but got shot down. We, from the council estate, were too antisocial. Actually, I looked at just 5 reports that had been reported to the police over motorbikes and teens throwing things from the bridge. For that, an entire community was denied access over the bridge, rather than looking for simpler solutions, like caging. Anyway, I put that aside for the time being to develop an exhibition based on working class women, alongside my artist friend and fellow Southtonian Jackie Exie for the Southampton City Gallery foyer, called Layers of the Lost Women. And here's a quick vid. I also created 2 books to go with that, which were on sale at the gallery. It was a leap back to the 1960s. It was here I thought, this project is just too big. I am bouncing around all over the decades, not effectively finishing any work on one particular era. I must pick one to actually finish. So I sadly declined to go any further with Key Arts and decided to go back to the very beginning and just concentrate on completing the 1960s and 70s first. 5 years later, and I am still in that time frame. Got narrowed down to the era I felt was most essential for our stories to be told first hand, just like the Pitbrow women, especially as I move towards life's latter years. Once my generation pop off the mortal coil, it leaves the possibility for distortions on our history. It can only ever be told second hand. If I live long enough, maybe I will get to the 80s, but that's another story.